Jim, let's begin with South Carolina's results. The New York Times wrongly reports that the Republicans have conducted a coronation, not a competition. That's actually reversed. The Democrats are having the coronation. The Republicans have had a competition, but it looks like it's over to me. What do you think?
Look, it probably was over after Iowa. Some people would say it was over after Trump's first indictment. He had a very large lead in the polls, both in those early states and nationally. But I think what Nikki Haley is demonstrating is that there's a significant chunk of the party, not a majority, but a significant chunk, anywhere from nearly half in Iowa to about 40% in South Carolina, 39.5, whatever it was, who are like, nah, we don't like Trump. This is not what we're most comfortable with. We don't see him as a safe bet for the general election. There's too much of a circus. There's too much of a drama. Could be January 6th stuff makes it, for whatever reason, they're just, nope, this is not the direction we want to go in. Now, that's not enough to win the nomination. As I just put up in the corner, she's getting 3 delegates out of a possible 50 in South Carolina. That's not nothing. And I point out that the district she won is where mom and dad live. So hi, mom and dad. But just kind of observing that, in a normal Republican primary, the front runner would be like, wow, okay, well, I'm glad I'm winning, but I'd have to, figure out some way to unify. As I wrote in the Post column this weekend, you may have seen that comment from one of the Trump aides where, DeSantis had made this utterly mundane observation that Trump should not use identity politics for selecting his running mate. And it was, you're going to be remembered for chicken fingers and pudding eating pudding with your fingers. It was this like volcanic eruption of rage against a guy who left the race a month ago and endorsed Trump. And there is this like nasty vindictiveness by the
who said that? I missed that.
Let me get it. Hang on. Don't have it at my fingertips.
That's okay because while you look for that, I want to
love to hear me looking for something at this very second. That's this is great.
Yeah, that's it. I want to play for you. No Labels chairman Joe Cunningham, who was on Fox with Will Cain, because I think Nikki Haley is eyeing No Labels. I want to hear what you think about it.
South Carolina's first district.
What's that?
The former congressman who represented South Carolina's first district. There's a theme running through this entire segment, Hugh. It all comes back to my parents' house.
Okay, here. I don't know if No Labels has got your parents' vote, but here is cut number 32, Low Labels Joe Cunningham.
Well, I mean, the truth is we're talking to a lot of spectacular people right now, and we're not ready to unveil those folks just yet. This has been a project to essentially give Americans another choice if they're unhappy with the presumptive nominees, which, it appears is going to be Trump versus Biden right now. But we don't know. Nikki Haley, she's going to remaining in the race. You can't count her out completely. And hats off to her for staying in it and for sticking with it. But we're looking for great quality people, folks that have broad appeal to independents, Democrats, Republicans. And yeah, I mean, Nikki Haley is somebody we'd definitely be interested in.
And what's your timeline?
Now, I got to tell you, Jim Geraghty, I spent the weekend after I flew to Nashville to address the NRB, and then the former president came along. I went back to California, went out and spent the weekend with 3 former senior Trump administration national security people. And we listened together to Nikki Haley's, quote, concession speech. And I said to him, I think she's thinking No Labels. What do you think?
One challenge would be, maybe you saw me wince or cringe a bit when the possibility of Nikki Haley running on the No Labels ticket. And that's not out of disliking Nikki Haley. And I think No Labels, on paper, they can say, look, there are a lot of Americans who don't like Trump. There are a lot of Americans who don't like Biden. They don't like either of these options. They're looking for something else. In theory, all that makes sense. I got to look at on my to-do list is to look at the sore loser laws and to see which states Nikki Haley would not be eligible to run in. I do know that 47 states have some version of it. Now, each one's got a slightly different one. Some would apply, some wouldn't, all that kind of stuff. But, No Label, it would be, out of all the people who can be a potential candidate for No Labels, people who've lost the Republican primary are one of the more challenging ones because they won't be eligible to be on the ballot everywhere. And
I got to tell you, though, I think those are unconstitutional, Jim. I just want you to know there's an argument that those sore loser laws are unconstitutional in a federal election for president. But assume for a moment she's not ideal, except she's the biggest name that anyone has even remotely
Accurate.
close to accepting no labels.
I would agree with that, and I would point out, Joe Manchin said he's not interested in running. Larry Hogan said he's going to run for Senate. So a lot of the names we've seen associated with no labels have taken themselves out of the running. Now, if no labels goes to Joe Manchin and says, "Please, we're begging you, you're the best option we have," maybe Manchin changes his mind. But I could see the prospect of it. And I hear from people who say, "Oh no, this is Nikki Haley trying to set herself up for 2028 or something like that." I suppose that's possible, but I don't. First of all, Trump's going to win the nomination. I don't see Trump becoming warm and fuzzy towards Nikki Haley again. You've seen her lash out at the way she dresses, lash out at the way. I just don't see him becoming cool with her. So whether he wins the presidency in November or not, I just think that she's going to be persona non grata to Trump world, to the MAGA movement. And I just don't see that being a potential option unless sometime in that span, the MAGA movement, if it doesn't collapse, it becomes less than the majority of the party. And right now, based on the early primaries we've seen,
I think it's a disaster for her to do no labels, and her rhetoric has not been helpful in the last couple of weeks for unifying the party. But it is what it is. I'm just now going to ask you to throw a dart for who do they get to run with her if she ran. I threw the dart. I think Tim Ryan is the best they can do for the undercard. If it's Haley, Ryan, you've got a center right to conserve. I mean, Nikki Haley's actually pretty doggone conservative. And then Tim Ryan, who's a very conservative Democrat, but a Democrat who's a loyal Democrat and a Nancy Pelosi enemy. What do you think of a Haley Ryan third party ticket? Does it go John Anderson or does it go bigger than John Anderson?
Out of the options they've had, that's actually one of the better combinations. I don't think there's much point in thinking geography because I don't think the odds of a third-party candidate winning a state are very unlikely. Ross Perot got 19% nationwide in 1992 and was, the strongest we've seen in many, like couple generations as a third-party candidate. Didn't win a state. Didn't really come all that close to winning a state, if my memory serves correctly. So don't worry about what state are they from. Just pick about who is the most appealing figure. Who could you say, if God forbid something happened to the presidential candidate, this person could step in and be president. And I think Tim Ryan, out of the Democrat, first of all, No Labels has said that they want a Republican and a Democrat. So the running mate.
That's right. Yep.
Right. And so you'd want somebody who's obviously got to be a centrist or minimally left of center. I think Ryan fits that. He ran against Pelosi way back when, kind of populist. Ironically, like Tim Ryan, there might be they wouldn't agree on a bunch of issues. You could have a really good Nikki Haley, Tim Ryan debate themselves on what the actual policies of no labels would be. That's one of the challenges when you try to do a Chinese menu, one from this party, one from that party. I'm sure you can find issues on protectionism and trade and probably foreign policy and find some disagreements amongst those two. But in terms of people who are like serious candidates who've been elected and who have actually, made a bit of a splash on the national scene, that's pretty good. And the realm, this pickings amongst conservative Democrats is pretty slim. And I think you're right. I don't think any Democrat currently in office would be that interested in it because you do this, you jump in no labels, every Democrat's going to hate you because you think they're convinced they're going to split the vote and elect Trump. I think if you have Nikki Haley as the possibility, there could be a bunch of Republicans who the folks who have not voted for Trump in the primary, who'd be very tempted to vote for Nikki Haley in a general election as a third
so,
option.
Jim, I've got 1 minute here. Let's just imagine an election with Joe Biden somehow hangs on and Kamala Harris with Donald Trump and let's not name the vice president, Nikki Haley and Tim Ryan running under no labels. You got Cornel West running as the Green Party candidate or something. I don't know which one he is. And then you've got Bobby Kennedy Jr. Okay, what's the percentage for those 5 candidates in terms of the popular vote?
When you ask me who's going to win, that's one thing. When I have to do the percentages for 5 candidates, Hugh, I got to do calculus. Hang on a second. Let me I'll be perfectly honest. I genuinely don't, because the perception has been for the first time, I was like, RFK, if he runs independent, is going to hurt Biden. I actually think that, and there's some polling that indicates that. There was a terrifying poll by Patrick Ruffini and Kirsten Soltis Anderson, who are like 30-some% of about a third of Americans think Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is his father. Now,
right,
Hugh, we've seen some medical miracles. We've seen people come back from some tough stuff. I tell you, RFK is not coming back from that assassination. That's not something, Also, he'd be 99. Like, there's a terrifying illustration of the historical illiteracy of Americans. They think that RFK Jr. is his father.
But the number?
Scenario, I guess Trump wins, but percentages, and none of the third-party candidates get more than like 7% nationwide. But it's still a chunk that makes somebody wins with 40-something percent, like 40.
Donald Trump wins with 45%.